of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now. I hear the sounds of your heartbeat. I can hear it now. I can hear it now.
All right. So for tonight's topic of conversation for our Heartbeat podcast, I've got a couple of really special guests in with us, and we're going to be discussing the Alberta pension plan. Oh, got a little reverb going here. And there we go. Killed that. So much technicality inside of the modern streaming things, and with us older guys, I mean, it's lucky I can even figure out my path into this. Anyway, so I've got Tanner today and Nicole Kimpton in, and we're going to go through a topic of discussion on this, but I know it's been really busy week for all of us. I know it's tough to get out to events and stuff. I know Tanner's done a number of different conversations on the Alberta pension plan and been out to a number of these events. So it's great if you've been out to those. But what I want you to understand is that Tanner's given us some of his time, not only this evening, but he is going to be hopping into a Zoom call. So I know at the end of these events, you get in line to, first off, meet Tanner and shake his hand, and then try and capture his ear for like 60 seconds. And there's always a couple of people that hoard others inside of these conversations. So you'll have one guy talking while you're waiting to go pee or waiting to go home or whatever that looks like, and you never do get a chance to meet him. So if you don't get a chance to ask in the stream tonight through YouTube, Facebook, make sure you hop into the conversation. I'll have the Zoom link listed in my Substack on Friday, and hop into the conversation, and we'll go from there. Anything that we don't answer tonight, or anything that doesn't quite fit in for you, make sure you jot down some notes and feel free to ask. So before we go too far, I know there's some people that are inside of my community that may not know who either Tanner or Nicole is, and just by way of chivalry alone, sorry, Tanner, you're kind of bumped on this one for a couple of seconds. Nicole, what I'd like you to do is take a couple of seconds and give yourself the introduction, and then Tanner, you can stream right in behind her.
Thanks very much, Sheldon. My name is Nicole Kimpton. I'm a stay-at-home mom, basically, have been for the last 4 years, and I was a nurse prior to. I was an LPN and taught clinical nursing to nurses, and I just saw a lot of things that didn't really make me happy in the nursing profession, and so I decided to leave it, and then heard about this possibility of an Alberta pension plan and decided that was something that needed some real good attention, and decided to align myself with people like Tanner and some of the other actuarials and chartered investment managers and Mitch Sylvester. And we decided that we needed people to hear some real information about what's happening in our Canadian pension plan, as well as what could happen with an Alberta pension plan. And so that's essentially me in a nutshell. And I've been working with Tanner since January, and it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that's awesome. And I think a lot of what we are hearing, and especially from the conservative side, and I'm not sure about what you guys are hearing inside of your own specific communities, is the NDP are really strong in their messaging right now, but they don't have much of a message to share other than hands off our pension. So they're on the fear and smear approach for this thing. And instead of actually having a conversation, and I know Marty up north had actually gone out to one of these events. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Marty. I know a lot of the people that are on my channels, they're familiar with Marty, but he went out and he said, all they said was, yeah, no, it's just bad if Danielle touches it. But they didn't really have any strong messaging behind it. So, one of the things that I want to kind of dive into is, what the CPP looks like, what the APP can look like. And I know that we'll be able to get a lot of that information from an economist like Tanner. So take it away, Tanner.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can so.
Oh, perfect. I don't know what's been up with the Wi-Fi. Anyways, yes, I'm an economist. I'm from Lloydminster, Alberta, but I went to school at the University of Economics. This has been, sorry, is it still being laggy, or can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You were a little bit glitchy there for a second.
Okay, if I am, I'll move. If it does it again, I'll move and go somewhere else and see if that changes it. Nevertheless, I went to the University of Calgary to acquire my degree in economics, and I graduated during the lockdowns. And so
Oh, you're back. Oh, you're gone. Yeah, he's going to be hopping back in a couple of seconds. I didn't know he went to the University of Calgary. That's interesting information. So, getting the, an economics degree inside of Calgary, and then, of course, diving into the pension plan, you probably have a good idea of a lot of the information that Tanner has shared. So, as we're waiting for Tanner to move locations here, why don't you pick up a little bit of the information for, from your side of perspective, like what's going on with the AFP right now that people should be paying attention to. I have the link that I'm going to be sharing with a wrap up of information so that people can get in on the electronic signatures. But can you tell us just a little bit about the what the AFP is and what they're going through?
Yeah, so the Alberta First Pension is we essentially we have to initiate a Citizens Initiative Act. But when you initiate a Citizens Initiative Act, you only have 90 days to collect the appropriate number of signatures that you are needing for that particular petition. Now, each petition is different. So with the Alberta First Pension, or with the pension plan to come to home to Alberta, we need 270,000 signatures to bring it, just to have a referendum. That's not even to secure a yes vote or anything like that. It's literally just to initiate a referendum. And the reason that is, like, we don't essentially have to have a petition. We should just be able to have a referendum. But the Danielle Smith, when she announced that she had wanted to have an Alberta pension plan come home, she wants to know that Albertans support it. And she wants to know that people are standing behind her, because she's not just in support of people that support an Alberta pension plan, she's in support of all Albertans. And so we have to remain neutral. And so that's one of the main reasons why she's taken such a step back and said, you guys take this on and you handle it and you bring it home, because if I know that people support this, then I can get behind it. But if they don't, then we're not going to have this.
And that makes sense. I got some feedback noise going on here. I'm just going to kill your mic here for a sec, Tanner. No, that's not it. All right. And I'm going to get back to you real quick here, Tanner. One of the other questions is I know that the Alberta Prosperity Project has had a petition of their own going out. But and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but what's the difference between what the APPs had going out and what the AFP has going out right now? Because it's very distinct and it's a lot more direct, and you guys are in a time window, whereas the APP one is kind of open-ended. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're absolutely correct. It's definitely open-ended, and basically it's looking for having the APP, or Alberta Prosperity Project, is bringing home a whole bunch of things, where for us as the Alberta First Pension, this is the first step in having Alberta have a little bit more independence and bringing things away from the federal government and bringing, provincial back municipal government into helping Albertans grow and increase their economics and everything. Whereas with the Alberta Prosperity Project, it's a whole level of how do you want to have Albertans interacting, creating movement and creation within Alberta versus just the pension plan. The pension plan is very specific, and we have a very short time frame because, as we know, the NDP, Heather McPherson, is trying to change that regulation that was listed in the Canadian Pension Plan Act itself to say that any province could leave whenever they want to, as long as they could have apples to apples. So you're creating the same pension that you would have in a Canadian pension plan that you would in an Alberta pension plan. And Heather McPherson is trying to get it to be a vote that 7 provinces would have to agree to let, say, Alberta leave.
And Heather McPherson, refresh my memory, she's the NDP federal MP for the University District inside of Edmonton, Alberta, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, just making sure. So I think probably one of the biggest distinctions that we need to make here is even if you have signed with the Alberta Pension or the Alberta Prosperity Project a petition that they've had going out, that's not enough. They need to come online, and again, I'll post the links for this so that people can actually get online and sign the online petition, because this is 90 days to get 250,000 signatures out of Albertans, and it's got to be done. And you know, we're kind of on the clock here, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right, Tanner. It seems like you're not glitching anymore. You got a more solid connection going on there. So
it was so good before when you and I were chatting before the show, and then of course when we start it gets bad, and so I'm out in the vehicle, which seems to be working better. Yes.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because I've done a few of these, and for people inside of the rural areas, 6 o'clock is the high traffic time for internet, and I do know a lot about the wireless and rural connections, and it's just like being caught in rush hour in traffic. There's everybody, they're finishing dinner, kids are hitting the gaming systems, parents are hitting the streaming systems. People are surfing online, watching their YouTube. Hopefully, they're joining the channel here in the conversation. So yeah, out inside of the smaller districts, you guys suffer the most. So, Tanner, let's take it from the beginning again and just go through your entire introduction, and then we'll pick up from there, man.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us on. Like you mentioned there at the start, I'm an economist. I grew up in Lloydminster, smaller town Lloydminster. And when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Calgary, where I got my degree in economics. And so I did that, of course, for 4 years. And then once I graduated, the lockdowns started. And so it meant that I, like everyone else, was unable to acquire a classical job in my field. And so I had to improvise for a little bit. So I actually hauled grain. I drove truck for a year or two while that was going on. And as I was doing so, I started a few social media pages. And I would comment on current events, what was happening in the world, and then I would try and explain what was happening in the world using the economic principles I'd learned in school. And so the Lord's blessed that now, and it's allowed me to start my own company. I have my own consulting company. It's called Tanner and a Day Incorporated. And as of late, I've been traveling around the province, speaking about, a variety of issues. Most frequently, obviously, it's been about the pension plan. And so I'll, Nicole and Mitch will host events. And then they'll ask if I can speak at this one or that one, and I'll show up and smile and say a few words, and then move on to the next one. So it's been a lot of fun. I've just authored my newest book. It's called Kingdom of Cain, and it talks about the insanity of progressivism and why Canada and other Western countries, for that matter, are in the state economically, morally, ethically, et cetera, that they're in. Sorry, I see I'm getting a call here. Sorry about that. It's been so much fun. And so, yeah, I'm an economist, traveling around, working hard, and fighting for, freedom and sensible values and so on.
And so is it too much of a stretch to say that us as Canadians or even us as Albertans are slowly slipping the noose from an economic scale around our own necks through, something that we're told is being progressive?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think that more and more people, economics is a funny thing where you go to school, like I'm talking about university, and of course you'll find that there are a lot of radicals in university and a lot of activism and so on and so on. And these activists, these individuals in university, will talk about how wonderful socialism is or how great this and that are, whatever it might be. But you can't deny reality forever. And so you can say that socialist policies are working. You can say that Justin Trudeau's government is doing a wonderful job economically. But eventually you have to say, wait a second, I can't pay my rent. Or I can't pay for groceries. Or I can't pay my power bills. I can't do this, that, and the other thing because it's becoming too expensive to live. And so even if there are still individuals who say that we're in a good spot economically, and I'm hearing less and less of it. I'm hearing fewer and fewer people say that. You can't deny reality forever. And so Alberta, I think, along with Saskatchewan, but even British Columbia, Ontario, etc., the entire country is waking up to the devastation that is swarming our province, or excuse me, swarming the country because of, in large part, liberal government policy, but just big government policy in general. So people are waking up, slow but sure. Of course, it'd always be nice if it was a bit faster, right? It's tyranny is best resisted if you resist it before it exists. So the sooner we can counter the momentum of the radical left and so on, the better, absolutely. But people are certainly seeing what's happening. They know what's happening. And that election in St. Paul in Ontario was a good example of that.
And on the election in St. Paul, it's the by-election, and the Liberals lost a stronghold that was like a couple of decades long, 3 decades long stronghold inside of Toronto.
Yeah.
And, when you realize that people inside of Toronto are starting to wake up to liberalism and the cost to themselves and their family, it's hard to wonder why there's still a lot of people inside of other provinces that haven't kind of figured that out.
It's true.
I think a big portion of that is and I don't want this to come out wrong. It's but there's no nice way of saying it. Is we haven't been punished enough.
No, I would agree. You're exactly. Tyranny is never present until it's omnipresent, and the story of history is filled with men and women who acted too late. It just seems to be a terrible tendency of mankind to be apathetic until you wake up one morning and realize government's inside your house, and it's too late to act at that point. So the challenge that we and others face is, how can we spur the public to become active democratically right now, so that way they can best restrict the unjustified movement of government and act before it's too late. We don't want to be like cattle, where we have to be touched with a prod before we move. We don't want to be pinched. We'd rather move first, and so mitigate the possibility of government acting unjustly. Yeah, I think you're dead on the mark. You're dead on the mark.
Yeah, so we have to be a little bit more proactive than reactive. And in the proactive, and the big part of being in the proactive sort of things is that we're called conspiracy theorists. So when we see some interesting ideas that are coming into play or that are being introduced to us, we think, well, this seems crazy, like it couldn't happen. The one thing that we have to appreciate is that some of the craziest shit that we've ever seen in our lives, that has ever been conceived, had been thrown at us, and it faced literally almost zero resistance in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
When you were told that vaccines would make you safe, the unvaccinated were your risk because the vaccines work so well, but you still had to wear this mask, stay inside of a 6-foot bubble, and follow fucking arrows on the floor. This is the height of lunacy as far as I'm concerned. Like, anybody that was still following along by the end of the craziest game of Simon Says that the planet has ever seen, you knew that there was something wrong. And we can discuss damages done by the jabs, and I can't talk too much about this because I'm just coming off of a YouTube suspension for having an injection of truth. Actual doctors and politicians inside of the province sponsoring an injection of truth. So I can't talk about that too much on the YouTube. But the latest is that there has been some cognition changes in people that's been impacted by their uptake of genetic modification. And I don't think that it had to reach to those levels, because I think some people are still kind of caught in those channels with or without the mRNA jabs, but I don't think that those have helped us any.
Yes, it's absolutely right. That's why, you can't talk about it too much, of course, but like injection of truth is brilliant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it exposes the truth for what it is. It goes with that same principle. You can't reject truth forever. You can reject it for a day or 2 days. You can even reject it for a year if you really want to. But eventually it's going to snap, and it's going to hit you in the face. You can't, can you imagine if a home builder rejected truth and said, I'm going to put studs, 52 inches apart on center instead of what they're supposed to be? Or I'm not going to pour a foundation? Like, there wouldn't be a house, right? You can't reject reality. It will crumble on top of you if you try to do so. Likewise, society, or politicians more accurately, can try and reject truth about the last 4 years as much as they want. It will snap back. It will hit them. It will not be denied. And that's what we're seeing. We're certainly seeing an increase in the what's the word, in the fervency in which people are active in demanding reality, truth, exposure, and so on from their politicians over the last 4 years, and rightfully so. Absolutely rightfully so.
And inside of these conversations, and what's really interesting is that there's still a lot of labels that are going on. And there wants to be a conservative moderacy, is what I'm finding, is that we keep hearing from the people that kind of slow walked us into this mess, is that we have to be more moderate if we want to see change. When the people that have impacted change in us are anything but moderate, but we get labeled the alt-right because we don't label them the alt-left, because we just call them lunatics for what they are. But I mean, that's getting into the kind of political sort of things. But when you're talking about these things, the slow boiling of the frog, and coming back to the topic of conversation, how long has the CPP been the slow boiling of the frog? Like, when is it time for Canadians to wake up that this is potentially a really bad investment, or at best, at worst, an absolute Ponzi scheme that's bound to collapse and fail before a lot of us might even be able to collect on it?
That's a wonderful question. Maybe Nicole and I can both answer it. I would answer the time was actually a long time ago. So it's high past time that we recognize that the Canadian pension plan isn't working for Albertans, right? We have an opportunity here to create something that is so far superior for individual Albertans compared to what the CPP offers and provides, that we have to do it now. Again, the time to recognize this was decades ago, to be entirely honest. Eyebrows should have been raised, and should have been raised seriously when the CPP announced it was going broke in 97 or 96, right around there, before it started, the CPP-IB. But instead, we've continued down this status quo path, and it's led to Alberta reducing a benefit that it otherwise could have used for our people in this province. And so we have to recognize what's happening now and swiftly act upon it.
Now, Nicole, before you chime in, and I want to ask something, because I don't think that this is Alberta specific. What Canadians are actually benefiting from the Canada Pension Plan? Like, it's providing probably the lowest quality of living,
yes,
for citizens across Canada as a retirement program as anything is, right?
Yeah.
And you guys can take it away, and whoever wants to chime in. And when I get a little bit too rammy, I'm sure somebody in the comments will let me know, and I hope they do. But feel free to say, shut up, man, like I'm trying to talk. So go ahead, like take away. Again, nobody tunes in to watch me talk. I've come to realize that after the first stream that I had. So take it away, Nicole.
I think one of the biggest things for me, and to sort of just reiterate, this is something that should have happened years ago. Danielle Smith is not the first person to talk about potentially bringing home the Alberta pension plan. This has been brought forth quite a few times prior. And for me, it's heart-wrenching for our seniors. Our seniors are not taken care of. Regardless of my collecting a pension plan 20 years down the line, or my kids collecting a pension plan 40 years down the line, that's not the point. We have seniors that built this country, and we have seniors that can't even feed themselves, drive themselves anywhere. Tanner makes a really good point where their income stays really flat like this, while everything else is going like this. And our seniors are the ones that are suffering the greatest for it. And I know that the ones that have the most fear in their hearts around what could happen, because there is always risk to everything you do. There's risk staying with the Canadian pension plan. But in this, the greater risk for them is to stay in the Canadian pension plan, because their future with the Canadian pension plan is not looking very good. I mean, you see some posts today that came out that Chrystia Freeland on June 24th has decided that we're going to put $600 million into China. Electric cars. Like there's no need for it, and seniors really need to just come out. And I think part of the thing they need to hear is they need to hear this information. So if they can't come out to a meeting, they can get onto a computer, their kids, grandkids, friends, bring it over to them and show them lives like this, so that they can see some actual factual information about what's happening with the Canadian pension plan, so that they know.
And on that $604 million that we invested into EVs in China, there's a couple of things that we need to talk about as to why it's like a really bad investment. Because $600 million is a big amount of money, but it is heavily trumped by the sixfold or 60-fold investment that we put into EVs inside of Canada. So, we've got $40 billion locked into manufacturing EVs and batteries. Batteries most specific, but, most recent with Honda or whatever, that's going to be producing cars inside of Canada. When Ford fled, they looked at the overall business model behind EVs. They looked at the manufacturing inside of Canada and said, you know what, we're not doing it. And then when the unions approached them and said, yeah, you are, they just said, no. Take a hike. We're leaving, and they moved their manufacturing back to China and into Mexico. So the idea behind all of this was to create jobs. So this $40 billion was to create jobs for Canadians that they ended up importing Koreans in these places to have. So we didn't get jobs out of this investment. We got $40 billion sunk into it. But this $40 billion goes against the $600 million that we just invested into EVs in China. And a big part of that is that there's now tariffs on EVs coming out of China, because the same government that wanted to invest in green technology that was coming out of China has deemed that they are engaging in unfair labor trade practices because they can hire cheaper labor. So we invested into something and then completely shot ourselves in the nuts on the whole concept by trumping it in a massive investment in Canada, and then by cutting our knees out from underneath us by putting tariffs on the vehicles that are coming out that we've invested in. So we've Tanner, help me understand this, man, because I don't think there's a worse play that you could have had on this. Like it's like going clay shooting or shooting clay pigeons.
Yeah.
Where you're grabbing Canadians' wallets and throwing them into the air, and then,
yeah. Oh,
and then hitting them with buckshot.
Exactly. Like, you're quite right to say there couldn't have been a worse play. Now, granted, that depends on what your idea of a smart play is. If you're a bureaucrat, and you say, I'm going to do anything in my power possible, and actually I'm going to do anything that's outside of my power too, because I don't respect the limits of power. If I want to push a social agenda, in this case, of course, an electric vehicle agenda, a decarbonized future, then I will do anything that's possible or necessary to see that vision achieved. Now, it might mean making awful investments. Maybe as a bureaucracy, I make the worst decisions from a profit maximizing, economically rational perspective. But it doesn't matter, because my objective in this particular instance isn't to earn as much money as possible. Instead, it's to see the abolition of oil and gas. And so sure, I might lose $1 million or $2 million or 10 or 20 or 600 million bucks. Who cares? It doesn't matter. So long as my contemptible vision for the future is achieved, I will have accomplished what I set out to accomplish to do. Now, on that perspective, from that plane, then government's doing a very good job, right? Then bureaucracy is doing a wonderful job of achieving those targets, those objectives. But you and I, as individuals, as pensioners or will be pensioners someday, we don't care for those objectives, right? It's not as though a social agenda is going to pay for our pensions in the future, right? It's not as though a decarbonization agenda itself is going to pay my pension check. No, instead, I need profit, right? You need profit. All of us need profit with our pension investments. With the CPP, it's a tax, but for the moment, we'll call it an investment or a contribution. We need profit on that. Otherwise, we're not going to get our pension checks in the future. So far from wanting a government to invest on our behalf or bureaucracy to do so, we so much prefer, we need someone else to do it. Someone who has one mandate, which is to maximize profit and mitigate risk. If you had that objective, even if government had that objective, right, they wouldn't be giving out billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in subsidy to companies that create electric vehicle plants here in Canada or batteries or so on. We wouldn't be sending all of these hundreds of millions of dollars to China because those investments are not as lucrative as other investments are in the market. And so it's just a tale of two differing worldviews, right? You have on one hand a bureaucracy that says we should use money to push a social agenda. You have on the other hand other individuals who say no, we should use investment money to actually invest and make profit so that when you and I retire, there will be a pile for us to pull from.
Which makes the most amount of sense. Now, over the last, I think it was like the last 15 years. So, I mean, part of this is, inside of a conservative prime minister, over the last 15 years, we've seen the contribution requirements on the CPP from workers, which is equally matched by employers, increase 60 to 80%, something along those lines. And then this year we've seen the introduction of the CPP2, which, and I'm not an economist, but I think what this means is that if we have to put more money into these funds to pay, the same amount of retirees, then our investments aren't keeping up to their mandate, which is keeping up to inflation. Does that sound correct?
Right. Well, let's break that down. Your point's excellent. It's true. The government continues to increase contribution rates for the CPP. So, decades ago, and it was about 3 point some% was the what it is of course, CPP is a tax. This is just a quick overview. CPP is a tax, and so it takes a portion of your income check and diverts it to the CPP. So if you make, if your one income check is $100,000 right now, CPP is going to take 5.95% of that check, which would be $5,900. But that isn't quite accurate because we'll talk about that in a moment. Nevertheless, that's how it works. It takes a portion of your income check and diverts it to the CPP itself. And then, as you mentioned, it takes the same amount from your employer. So whatever you pay to the CPP, your employer matches that. Now, as it stands, you are paying 5.95% of your income check to the CPP until you earn, I think it's 66,000 or just about there, just above that, 66,000 some dollars, somewhere in there. Once you make that money, once you earn $66,000 in a year, it used to be, last year this was the case, that you were done sending to the CPP. So you didn't send any money to the CPP when you made your $70,000 or your $80,000. You didn't send money to the CPP on those dollars. It was just on the dollars you made up to 66 some thousand dollars. But you're right. Now there's been a change. Now there's a new, they call it a top up. Again, it's just another tax. So once you earn $66,000 and you've paid all your money to the CPP, from 66, 5 or whatever it is, to I think it's 74,000 or just right around there dollars, you will pay an additional 4% of your income check to the CPP. Yes, you're absolutely correct. And then once you reach that $74,000 mark, you're done paying into the CPP for the rest of the year. Now, why are they doing that? Well, of course, you have all of these actuaries and so on who give reports about how stable and secure the Canadian pension plan is. They look at the Canadian pension plan's investments and they'd say, are those stable and secure? What do demographic rates look like? What do birth rates look like? What do income rates look like, and not just this year, but over the next 2 or 5 or 10 or 15, 20 years, and so on and so on. And then they tell bureaucracy what they should do for contribution rates, payout rates, and so on and so on and so on. So what do the CPP's investments look like? Well, last year they did very poorly. The way it works is, the CPP brings in money and then they send it out, and they send most of it out, right? So that at the end of the year, after they've paid all their seniors and so on, they only have a few $1 billion left over. Now, those few $1 billion, they invest, and they invest in a variety of holdings all around the world. And once they've invested it, they therefore earn investment income and build up a pile of dollars. In this case, it's about 620 some billion dollars large right now. That's the latest update. So last year, those investments didn't do very well, right? They earned a very poor rate of return. It was like 1.7%. It wasn't good at all. But on the average, if you look at a 10-year span, according to the CPP's website, their earnings or their average investment rates of return are about 9.5 or 10%, somewhere in there. So this is a common argument in favor of the CPP. People will say, well, the CPP's investments are doing so marvelously. Why exactly would we want to leave it? But of course, in that argument, those same activists completely neglect the fact of the matter pertaining to individuals. They say the CPP is doing so wonderful with its investments, but they never bother to talk about how you and I and seniors are doing with their quote-unquote investments, their taxes, their contributions to the CPP. And when you look at those numbers, when you look at exactly how individuals are doing with their returns from their Canadian pension plan taxes over the year, it's nowhere near the juggernaut that we've been promised it is. No, average rates of return are about 3%, maybe 3.5%, maybe 4% if you're rich and live a long time. But on the average, it's about, 3%. That's your rate of return with your CPP. And it's even lower for a man like myself, who has, I was born in the 90s, and so I should expect a 2.5% rate of return on my Canadian pension plan. You see, no one would walk into a private mutual fund office and have a mutual funds advisor tell them how wonderful the company does year after year after year, and yet when he pulls up sheets for individuals who work with that mutual fund, or who at least invest their money with the mutual fund, if he shows them poor rates of return on their investments, no one's going to stay. You see, I might have a mutual fund, and they might tell me that this year the mutual fund company earned rates of return of 15% or 20%. Wow, marvelous, I might say. But then when I look at my own returns and see, wait a second, you're only giving me 2% or 3% rates of return on my investment, why would I stay with them? I don't care how well they're doing. I'm concerned with how well I am doing. And so it's that same argument that applies to the Canada Pension Plan. So why increase contribution rates? Oh, more money. It's always more money. The bureaucracy, any bureaucracy, is such a massive machine. It's a hydra, and it only grows in size. It loves to expand, and it expands at magnificent rates. Nicole often talks about at these events how in the year 2000, the CPPIB consisted of 5 workers, and it cost $4.4 million to run. That number has now changed into the thousands, right? Workers are now numbered the thousands with the CPP, and the cost to run it is now $4.4 billion, not million, $billion. And so it's just this cycle of spend more, take more, spend more, take more.
Nicole, if you can expand on that, since Tanner said that that's kind of your topic of conversation, that would be great. Because I don't want this to be a total sausage fest conversation. I don't want you to feel like you're only involved in this for DEI purposes. Now, you were brought into the conversation because you're knowledgeable and because you've gone through a lot of these conversations. So, again, don't wait for me to shut up. Chime in whenever.
No, it's true. The Canadian Pension Plan, or CPPIB, I mean, they have offices around the world now, 8 offices. One of the offices, if you look at the annual report, it'll actually tell you how much money each place makes and what CEO makes. And the CEO of Singapore makes 4.4 million. So that's in 2000. That was how much money it costs to run the CPP. So why is it now all of a sudden it costs 4 billion? Well, because we have all of this unnecessary office space and administrative costs around the world. And I love when Tanner talks about how government And if you have a farmer and you expand and you create a larger infrastructure of farming, it works better for the farmer. But in government, it doesn't work that way. And Tanner, you explained that really well. I really like that that analogy because it's so
Yeah. Yeah, it's that principle, like you mentioned, of we call it economies of scale. And the idea is the larger you get, the more efficient you become. That tends to be a rule in the private market, but it doesn't exist in the public market, in the government sector. It's not as though the bigger government gets, the more efficient it becomes. It's the opposite. The larger government gets, the more inefficient it becomes. And no doubt the same is happening here. No doubt about it.
But there's also somewhat of a socialist aspect that kind of hops into this, where they expect you to, and you were talking about this, just a couple of seconds ago, Tanner, where they expect you to believe that, this is all the great and good that's doing for everybody else, but that everybody else doesn't include you. So it's what you're paying into versus what you're getting back out. Go ahead, Nicole.
Well, if it was going to benefit me, why is it that it's not an option for me to take that money and say, okay, you can invest it in the Canadian pension plan, or take this money, you have to invest it. You can invest it in a Canadian pension plan, or invest it in a pension plan that's going to benefit you for your life and your family. Because the way that it is right now, the pension doesn't benefit my family. If me being a stay-at-home mom with my kiddos, I'm not working right now. So if something happens to my husband and he gets, he's 65 and he gets a Canadian pension plan, I get none of that. I get nothing. And yet I stayed at home to raise our children. So it's a mandatory opt-in for the Canadian pension plan. And it can't be a pension at that point, because it's not for the benefit of me. It's for the benefit of everybody in Canada. And I saw the comment pop up earlier. You're exactly right. It's the welfare of the senior citizens.
Yeah. And that was Igor that was saying that. And if right now, and especially knowing what we know now, I mean, we're in the age of information. And I discussed this with a couple of people at the Bitcoin Rodeo earlier today, is we're not in the age of just information. We're in the age of over information. Mm-hmm. There is so much coming at us so fast that we have no idea what to absorb, and we don't have the time to sift through it to come up with the true answers. And I think that that's a big portion of why the biggest lying sacks of shit on the planet that have ever existed in the Canadian government can continue to get away with pushing. You get back more than you put in, and the liberal lies. Yeah, it's kind of like tastes exactly like brownies and other vegan lies book that we've all seen memed out, right? Yeah. These people, continuously call everybody else liars while they continuously lie, despite, people coming out and showing them that this isn't exactly what is. I want to go a little bit more, Nicole, I'm going to tap you on this one. I want to go a little bit more into, so if I understand this right, we had 4 or 5 employees that worked for like $4.4 million. And now that is how many people that are employed by managing the CPP fund?
It's over 1,000. There's a couple thousand, I believe, that are working now with the CPP. It's in the annual report. But the biggest thing to me was just the offices around the world. We have a Canadian pension plan, and yet we're sending it out to other departments to, it's like saying, okay, we're going to grow some corn and we're going to grow some wheat in this field, but we're going to have China grow it for us. And they're going to water it for us. And so they'll have to send us the time schedule and all of the things. Like, it would make absolutely no sense, right? You're in your own backyard, you do your own stuff. It's all this sending it out to everybody else, branching it out everywhere else. And for like the one CEO of Singapore that makes $4.4 million, his kids go to school, private school, they're driven to and from, they're back and forth, they have private groceries, all of that. It's like, on our money, on our Canadian pension plan money that's supposed to be invested so that Canadians can get money for their retirement. But this guy who's operating it out of Singapore is making this money. So
And excuse my ignorance on this, but he would be deemed a civil servant for Canada. He'd be paying into the Canada pension plan. Would he also be paying into like a Singapore pension plan? Like how does the taxation? What would? And I don't know if that's inside of your expertise,
that would
but
be a counter question. But I would think that he probably is getting a private pension plan. I don't know that the Canadian Pension Plan Investing Board is on the Canadian Pension Plan schedule. That would be interesting to know if the workers there actually received a Canadian pension plan, because as you know, most government workers have a private pension plan, and their private pension plan, if they, I have a friend whose mother passed away, and she was working within the government, and she made too much money off of her government pension plan to even get what she had contributed to a Canadian pension plan. So I would imagine they don't get the same pension that we do. They have a better one.
well, you know, at 4.4 million taxpayer dollars per year, living in Singapore, and I've never been to Singapore, and I'm not sure what the exchange rate is like. But I am going to say if he's making $4.4 million a year, he's living an above average Canadian lifestyle. Now, inside of that, when you see these annual reports, do we also see a brick and mortar cost? Like, given that the government flow through right now is tending towards still remote working, and we've seen that. What was her name out of the Nikki something, the NDP that flew her family to Quebec for Christmas for 17 grand and then claimed it all as business, while she never makes it into Parliament, right? Like they're pretty fond of this remote work aspect until they have to fly their family into a family vacation, and they can, throw it back at the government, and then even when they're called on it, only pay back a portion of what they think is, their family expenses versus their own individual costs. But is there an actual brick? Like, do we have an office building in Singapore where people supposedly show up to?
That I'm not certain of. I haven't been. They say that there's one. The paperwork says that there's one.
Oh, yeah. So it is on paper.
One.
Yeah, and then that's what I want to know. Are we paying the bricks and mortar? Are we paying, the lights? Are we paying the building cost, the rental? Did we buy property? Is that part of, what Canadians have invested in? Because if we're renting offshores, and I mean, that's a large amount of money that's coming out of the contributions that people are putting in, where the people that are, telling us that this is what we need to do and this is how many employees we need to have, are also the largest advocates of remote working or, these integrated working styles. If you don't got to be there, then why are we there? And why are we paying the extra bricks and mortars for 1,000 people versus 4 people, that most likely worked out of a shoebox that's, in some other government building that we were already paying for? Like, it's an explosion of costs.
I think the biggest thing here is that there's like so much corruption within the government, and I think as a society, as people, we really need to band together to come out. I mean, even something as simple as bringing a pension plan, just to have a discussion on it. It's such a hot topic. It should be a nonpartisan issue, and yet a lot of people think that it isn't. And it is. It's for the benefit of Albertans, and eventually it would also be for the benefit of Canadians, because there's so much economic growth to be had in all the provinces of Canada that Alberta could be an example. Quebec's done it. Quebec has never been a part of the Canadian pension plan since 1966 and its inception. Alberta could do better. They could operate a different model. And yes, there are things that we have done that haven't been the best, but that's where our involvement has to continue to come in. We have to not just be like, oh, okay, now it's back here to Alberta. We're just going to let them take care of it. We have to start stepping up and being a part of the action, being a part of the movement, being a part of whatever it is that you want to see in Alberta. Even if you're afraid of it, awesome, be afraid. Come talk to me. Come have a conversation. We have to stop having these divisive conversations where it's, you can believe in this, but I'm not going to have it. That's a hate crime. No, it's just a difference of opinion. And we need to come together and go, okay, why is this so scary? What can we do to make it not so scary? And actually have these real, raw conversations instead of running from them, because running from them is not doing us any good.
No, and I 10 out of 10 agree with that. And here's how hot these buttons are. So, I post on Facebook. So, I mean, this is being live streamed on my Facebook, and I have like 12 friends on Facebook because I'm not a big Facebooker, but I push it out to there anyways. And the reason being is because YouTube flagged me and suspended me for a period of time for talking again about the jabs. Anyways, I belong to my community support Facebook group, Dalhousie. I'm in Dalhousie, Northwest Calgary, and everything that they put through there is moderated. Now, when we were going through the last provincial election, there was flaming posts, flaming. The hysterics inside of our community about people kicking over their orange NDP signs. There was 2 people that lost 2 signs. Conservatives didn't bother mentioning the same thing because, I mean, all the signs got kicked over. I walked down the block and I'd seen that everybody that had a sign had their sign kicked over or taken or whatever it looked like, which has gone on since before I was able to vote inside of Calgary. But I've lived in this community for 30 plus years. But it is more left-leaning, and we did flip provincially from, conservative to NDP. So because this isn't a specific promoted event, nobody pays me from NDP, UCP, Liberal. I'm not paid for having this discussion. You guys aren't paid. I mean, I'm certainly not sending you out a check. So yeah, keep that in mind before you take too much time on the call, right? Like, you're getting nothing from this. But I posted, listen, if you have questions or concerns about the Alberta pension plan, here's what I'm doing tonight. I'm hosting a live stream with an economist, and we're just going to have an open discussion about, the pros and cons of, what the APP may offer. And everything inside of the channel, and I don't know if it's for everybody, because anybody else can seem to post anything on their fucking cats or, dog poop on their lawn or, the happy rainbow events that are going on in their backyard, whatever that looks like. Everybody else is allowed to post their bullshit. But when I post something that should be important to everybody inside of my community, that should be important to all Calgarians, all Albertans, not only was it moderated, my post shows up as moderated, it was disallowed. So this conversation will not reach to the people outside of the people in my community that individually follow me. And I'm going to say that there's like fucking 0 of them. Because I don't participate in that, in the community, by way of Facebook much anymore. I mean, I literally shovel an entire block worth of sidewalks. And I've been doing this for, I'm going to say the last 15 years. So we have a lot of foot traffic. I'm on a main drag. My neighbors have either been elderly or they've passed away. They've always been there's always been a situation inside of our community where, we have this large amount of foot traffic. It's a large amount of kids that are going to either the community center or to the junior high HD Cartwright that's, kitty corner to me. As well as we have a number of people that, use this as foot traffic for getting down to the grocery store, to, the Safeway. So when my neighbors weren't able to do that, I just basically picked up the ball. I've got a snowblower. So when it snows enough that, a snowblower is warranted, I do the entire block. And now I got one of those gas-powered leaf blowers. And I love that fucking thing. And like, I can spend an entire day just blowing snow with that thing. And my wife comments about how I often do. So, I mean, I'm happy to go out and, maintain the sidewalks and stuff on this. That's my involvement inside of my community as a small portion. Because I'm not on Facebook, because I've only got grandchildren that are a part of the community now. Like my grandchildren are now going to the play school and the elementary school inside of our community, Dalhousie, that I'm not allowed to post on, that my kids went to. That's how long we've been rooted inside of our community. But I'm not allowed to post on my. I mean, I'm older, I'm sure, than the moderator that told me that I'm not allowed to post, a conversation on there. But that's how politically heated it's actually gotten. And it doesn't have to be about politics. It has to be about, and this isn't a pro-Smith, it isn't an anti-Smith, this isn't a pro-liberal government, this isn't an anti-liberal government, which everybody should be at this point, because even the liberals are asking for Justin to throw himself under the bus. Just most recently this week, Trudeau announced that he's not coming to the Stampede, which, there's not a Calgarian out there that can give a shit less if he showed or if he didn't show. But a big portion of that is his only liberal support inside of the city of Calgary, George the Porch Pirate Chahal. I don't know if I've got his name right either. Whatever. Is basically one of the liberal MPs that's asked for him to resign. The people that tell us that the budget will balance itself keep telling us why they need to take more of our money to not balance the budget. It's the most offensive and extreme thing that I can even think of. Tanner, we've heard Chrystia Freeland and the Liberals brag about the Canada Pension Plan as being a world-class fund or world-respected, something along those lines. But in the same press conference that she boasted about that, she also said that this is what underpins our AAA credit. So, I've got a couple of questions about this in particular that I hope you can help me out with. Is one, does anybody envy what our CPP looks like? Does anybody invest, or does anybody seriously think that the poor returns on the CPP make us a world-class fund? And the second thing is if the CPP is underpinning our AAA credit, is the Canadian government using that as leverage to borrow money against to keep our credit rating up?
Right. So those are good questions. Let's take the first one you asked first. Does anyone really envy the Canadian Pension Plan? Well, it's true that the Canadian Pension Plan, as far as numbers go, as far as their own numbers go, is a large pension plan when you consider other public pensions in the world. I think Canada's pension plan is 5th largest in the world. So if you look at it superficially, you can say, yes, that is a massive pension plan, and it's performing relatively well, it seems, because they have, again, if you consider nothing else, a large pile of investment income. But again, for individuals, when you look at individual rates of return, when you look at what the average pension check is for new seniors today per month, which is $758, that's all. When you look at widowers' pensions, when you look at the fact that once you pass away, it's not as though the rest of your contributions, your taxes are passed down to your estate. No, instead, all of your earnings are left with the CPP. They vanish as far as your family is concerned. Then all of a sudden, it doesn't become so enviable. When you look at the actual individual facts about the pension plan, I do not believe anyone would envy it. Who? Who would envy a pension plan where you pay thousands and thousands of dollars into every single year? And again, it's more accurate to call it a social insurance plan. That's what the CPP calls themselves. They don't call themselves a pension plan, not on their website. No, they call themselves a social insurance plan. When you look at the thousands that are sent to that CPP every year, just from you alone, let alone from everybody else across the country, and then compare it with the rates of return that you receive when you retire or pull your pension at 65 or 63 or 70, whatever age that might be, very few, if any at all, would envy such a program because the rates of return are so anemic in comparison to what we've been led to believe by government. So in that regard, no. Now, as to the second, does the Canadian government use the pension as a leverage, to borrow more or what might have you? Okay, so here's something interesting. As you know, a balance sheet has two columns. There is an asset column and there's a liability column. Very simple. So you and I even, let alone business and so on, have this same balance sheet with our home expenses and home incomes, and we call them, on one hand, assets, and on the other hand, we have liabilities. Wonderful. And as you know, the assets and liabilities always have to equal each other, right? You have to basically end up at zero. If you have $100 in assets, you must have $100 in liabilities. Okay, great. Now the government has this same balance sheet as well. We've been told it balances itself, right? The government each year with its budget has an assets side of the budget and it has a liability side of the budget. Now, here's what the government does with the Canadian pension plan. Earlier in this show, I told you, or I talked to you about the Canadian Pension Plan Investing Board's pile of investment income that it's earned over the last 25 years. Right now, that pile is equal to about $620-ish billion. Then the actual number, it might be 625 or whatever it is available online. But let's suppose it's $620 billion worth of investment income. Okay, that is counted as an asset because it's investment income. And it's counted as an asset for the federal government. So when the federal government provides their budget to the public, you and I can read it, and we can see that there are, in this assets and liabilities column, more accurately on the asset side of the column, $620 billion in investment income. The government calls that an asset, and they say it's their asset. Therefore, it makes the budget look so much better than what it otherwise might be. Because if you didn't have that $620 billion in asset on the asset side, think about how much worse the budget would look, right? We'd see a number that is much larger in debt, or the debt itself would be much larger than what it is already every single year. So government says, wonderful, we have this huge asset, this $620 billion, excellent, excellent, and it makes our books look better than what they are. But there's a problem, right? Even though the government adds that $620 billion on the left side of the column, on the asset side of the balance sheet column, they refuse to add in the liabilities accrued by the CPP on the liability side of the column. So if there were no other assets and no other liabilities on this balance sheet, if government gave it to you, all you would see is $620 billion on the asset side. Wonderful. Wow, excellent. When in reality, we should be seeing $620 billion on the asset side and the liabilities accrued to the CPP on the liability side. Then it would wash each other out. It would do more than that because the CPP's liabilities are in the trillions, right? They're huge because we're looking at liability not just this year, but 10, 20, 50 years down the line. Thus, therefore, when all is said and done, and we realize that government doesn't factor the CPP's liabilities into its budgeting account, we can see that government manipulates the CPP to increase their credit standing and increase their financial position from what it otherwise should be. It's bad enough already. If they told the truth about the CPP, it'd be so much worse than what we understand it to be right now.
Now let's talk about the truth behind the CPP, because this $620 billion isn't $620 billion. It's not a liquid asset.
No, that's right.
This is paper money. So in much the same way that the CPP is heavily invested in these EV vehicles in China that we've now thrown tariffs on to slow down the manufacturing, in the same way that we've shot ourselves in the nuts, they've invested other funds, CPP funds, into green technologies. Now, in order to prop up these green technologies, Canada as a country has to buy the green technologies that we've invested in, which bloats up their actual valuation of these companies. In the same way that we're going through the green slush fund, investigations inside of the House of Commons right now, or inside of Parliament. So these companies that are supposedly making all this money need to have all this money invested in them in order to keep their actual balance sheets above or in the black, so that they're not in the red, right? And even though their black is actually more, what would it be, like blue or gray, or because it's not actual income, it's income that's coming from the government. Whereas without that, they'd make zero and they'd end up folding. And we've seen a couple of these companies that, despite the amount of money that the government's given them, despite the fact that they literally do zero, they're still taking this money. So these paper gains, and I've gone through a lot of these conversations over the last few days on investments, because I've gone through this whole Bitcoin rodeo thing, and people say to me, like, can you help me out with Bitcoin? And my answer on that is no, because I don't know anything about it. However, I am hosting a Bitcoin conversation with one of the mentors from the rodeo next week. So kind of a little personal injection there. But I used to trade in the stock markets, and when people go into investing for themselves, they look at investments that they can afford. And the crypto coins looked like a really good investment because people with $50 could actually get a crypto wallet, invest their $50, and then show these same paper gains. And before these things, that we could trade on things that are called the pink sheets, which we still can. And the pink sheets are a super sub level of the of the U.S. markets. In which case, you can buy shares of a company for fractions of a penny. So it's kind of like buying currency, where the lowest denomination is a pip, which is a fraction of a penny, 1/10 of a penny for USD to CAD. But these things show paper gains, so you can buy something that looks like it could skyrocket, but it's all based on liquidity. Because if you can't sell that at market price, at what you think it's worth, then what you're holding isn't actually worth what it is. So when we talk about the truth behind this $620 billion, this $620 billion isn't a liquid asset. These aren't financial holdings where if we sold them tomorrow, this is what it would be worth. And in fact, Tanner, we talked about a couple of properties that the Canadian pension plan has liquidated in the last 12 months, where we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars into these properties and sold at like an 85% loss, while still showing this as positive holdings on our balance sheet as assets for their worth, for what we put into them, while not chalking them down to the actual losses under liabilities, right?
Right. Yeah, you bring up a good point. So the Canadian Pension Plan Investing Board obviously takes the money that it's given every year and invests in a variety of different holdings. It has a lot invested in real estate. It invests in the stock market. It has a huge, huge portion of its portfolio invested in what's called private equity. Like, it has 30-some% of its portfolio in private equity. And just for comparison, the largest pension in America has only 11% of its portfolio in private equity, and so on. Like, that private equity point, it's worthwhile because, well, oversimplified, it works like this. As the Canadian Pension Plan Investing Board, you send a private equity firm some money. The private equity firm then uses that money to purchase, a failing business. And then it flips that business, because obviously it purchased it at a very low price. It flips that business, revamps its vision and changes board members and so on, and then hopefully sells that business down the line at a profit. It then takes the profit, splits it with the CPP or its investors, CPPIB, and oh, wouldn't you know it, we've made a lot of money. But of course, those valuations about how valuable the private equity investments are dependent on those companies, those investments being sold at the values that the company says it's going to be valued at. So you're quite right. It's not as though we could go to the CPPIB tomorrow and say, give us our $625 billion in cash. No, instead it's tied up in, in a variety of holdings, right? In a variety of assets which are not liquid like cash, but rather are, in real estate or stock markets or private equity or what might have you. So when we hear this $625 billion number, it's wise to ask ourselves, is that number accurate? The CPPIB is nowhere near transparent enough about its investments for us to be confident in their numbers. Not at all. And I know they'll argue and say, well, we have to protect private investor privilege. We have to make sure our investors or investments aren't compromised by the public and so on. But still, yet there could be more transparency than what we see. We do not see enough of it for us to be comfortable with the CPPIB's valuations. Government, believe it or not, has been known to lie before, and it wouldn't surprise us if they were fudging numbers again.
Yeah, and there's a big portion of that, and even when it comes down to liquidity, because we are invested in a lot of this green technology.
Yeah.
And when we look at countries like Germany that spent billions of dollars to create a renewable infrastructure on energy, and has now started, tilling in their fields and started to put coal plants back up because they can't afford the electricity that's generated by unreliable and costly, green technology. If we were to divest from these things at the same time the rest of the planet was, it's a run on a stock. I mean,
Yeah.
like these things are hinged on the fact that Canada is being suckered into investing them to prop these things up. So we're artificially levitating a number that is inaccurate to begin with, that we have no transparency into to begin with.
Mhm.
And if provinces like Alberta, if other provinces looked at these things and just said, you know what, we're going to have a moratorium on renewables and shut these things down where there's no investments going into these things, either other countries are going to have to continue to maintain the investment into these things to keep them propped up, or the whole shooting match collapses, and that'll happen really fucking fast, like terrifyingly fast,
I
like
think that's the biggest reason
roller coaster fast.
that they don't want us to move the Alberta pension plan home, because it will expose the biggest scheme since 1966. If you or I were to do what the CPP have done, we'd be in jail already, because it's a Ponzi scheme. But it's the
Good.
biggest Ponzi scheme out there, and it's legal, and it's
Well,
being
it's what-
operated on a day-to-day basis.
And again, coming from the stock world, it's what we call a pump and dump. We're the ones that are buying stock into dog shit companies, and we're trying to talk other countries into buying into these things so that we can hopefully at some point divest from these, or at least take a profit from them. But the profiting, as Tanner has already mentioned, is so minuscule that we've had to introduce increased rates of CPP, the CPP2, in order to maintain what we show on the books as something that resembles a marginal prosperity at best inside of a confusion, a melee of inaccuracies. Like it's insanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Now, Nicole, you've dug into some of these offshore, or these global CPP, 1,000 employees, the bricks and mortar, all the rest of that stuff. Have you found any where somebody's made such an egregious error that they've just been outright fucking fired?
No.
No. Isn't that tragic?
And it is. And I did watch that one video from the one conservative that was posting all of the stuff that Trudeau has done. It was an 1.5 hour long video. And it's insane that when people get fired, they still get brought on and they still get to continue to work even though they've been fired. So I don't know, if they've been fired, they're probably still working on some level to help them out, because I don't know. There's just, like I said, there's so much corruption and there's so much non-transparency that we don't really know. We don't know who's working for what now.
And without seeming, too much into blasphemy, and I know you guys are, fairly, rooted inside of a religious community, and I don't want to take away from that. But known as Green Jesus, Stephen Giblets, our minister of green horseshit, whatever he is, he's on the pad too. So he's on a pretty large, or he's a stakeholder in one of these green investments that Canada keeps pumping cash into. So over and above, the terrible investments that we're making it so that liberals seemingly prosper, especially Green Jesus, Giblets, whatever.
Yeah, and it shouldn't surprise us. That's the way government operates. Everyone is, these socialists love to promote a worldview where they don't care about themselves. All they care about is everybody else. They're perfectly selfless, perfectly benevolent, perfectly generous, and they just have this wonderful heart of gold. that only cares about helping others. And it's like, that is so far from the truth. They're
Mhm.
self-interested like everybody else. And Guilbeault or whoever it might be, how many government officials, not just in Canada, but in America as well, have we heard about using their power and their influence to get rich? It's disgraceful, right? It's a joke because, again, it manipulates the market in a way it otherwise wouldn't normally go. All of these subsidies for green vehicles, well, I don't even like I was saying the other day, I don't even like the word green because it implies that you can see color in a world without carbon, and you can't because there are no lights, because there's no power to turn on the lights. So it'd be much more apt to just call it dark energy or something. Well, not even dark. Nevertheless, um, you know,
Another
you
subject for another day.
well, that's
We'll
just
smoke
it.
some, we'll smoke a big bowl at some point.
Um, nevertheless, you have government and government officials who use their positions
Yeah.
to get wealthy. That's just and this isn't a new phenomenon, right? This has been the way since Adam fell. This is the way humans operate, or at least humans in power operate. And so far from allowing government to exercise their positions to increase their wealth in that sort of corrupted way, it should be the opposite. The same is true with this pension plan. We cannot for one moment allow government to touch the pension plan, the Alberta pension plan. It has to be kept
Separate.
far away, more than arm's length, more than a football field's length away from government. They can't be the ones who invest. I know, it's a bureaucratic pension plan in that regard where government collects the tax and government sends out the check, fine, so be it. But they can't be the ones who decide where the contributions or where the taxes are invested. That can't be their mandate. It can't be within their political threshold to do so. No, otherwise it'll be used for corrupted measures.
So hands off our money, Smith,
Yeah.
wouldn't even come into play if we had an actual properly managed Alberta pension plan.
Yeah.
In the same way as it wouldn't be. And somebody else pointed this out, and I'm just going to throw this comment up because I'm not sure of the accuracy of this statement, because I know it was the Janice Irwin Premier of Ontario who was shutting down the coal plants in Ontario, while the teachers' pension plan was investing in not coal mines, but in coal energy that was being produced out of, I think it was like Seattle or something. But it's one of these things is, we're making the wrong, we're either the right hand's not knowing what the left hand is doing, or the prosperity is actually, favoring, one side of the coin while completely going against the other. I mean, we're not making the investments that are right for Canadians, which, we've already kind of talked about. But even on the investments that we're making, and I think that I want to, I heard this, and I think this is kind of what you alluded to earlier in the conversation, Tanner, is that you said that the CPP is on the balance sheet is trillions of dollars in debt, because there's $620 billion that's inside of the CPP. And I think the big part of where we as people go wrong is we can't actually conceptualize what $1 billion is. We went from, having thinking a millionaire was somebody that was with incredible wealth. Whereas if you had $1 million today at the age of 50 and decided to retire, you're probably dying of poverty by the age of retirement of 65, right? $1 million doesn't go that far, whereas $1 billion doesn't go that far, whereas $620 billion seems like a really large figure, and for 40 million people, it seemingly is. But that $620 billion is, if people stop paying into the CPP right now, that's only equivalent to 5 years of payout of the CPP. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it might give you a little bit more than that, to be honest, because I think right now we're paying out our seniors right now somewhere in the tune of $50 to $55 billion. It works in around there. So you'd have a little bit more than that, but of course those demographics are changing every year too. And with the boomers retiring, with boomers now taking their pension checks, that number, that $50 to $55 billion, will increase substantially here over the next few years. So that, yeah, you will drastically reduce the lifespan of a pension, or the pension, if people stopped paying into it every year. Yeah, you're quite correct. The liability portion of the Canadian pension plan is trillions of dollars large. It is, because you're looking not just at the liabilities, and by liabilities, I mean what the Canadian pension plan owes seniors who are now taking their pension checks. You don't just look at today or tomorrow, right? You look decades into the future, because I'm owed a pension, a CPP, and you're owed a CPP. And most viewers here are owed a CPP, you know? And so you have to look 50, 60 years into the future to get an accurate representation of what the liabilities look like with the CPP. So yes, they are trillions of dollars in liability, with only, quote unquote, only hundreds of billions of dollars in assets. What we mean to say then is if people stopped contributing to the CPP tomorrow, if the CPP no longer took in workers' contributions, then yes, the CPP wouldn't last forever and ever, right? The liabilities drastically outweigh the assets. But the CPP says, don't worry, it's been designed that way, because Canadians will still be contributing today, tomorrow, and decades into the future. And so workers are going to make up that differential between our liabilities and our assets. They're going to be the ones who cover the difference. So there's no need to stress. But of course, that does assume a lot of variables decades into the future. You have to make a lot of predictions about the future to say such a thing, which personally, I'm not as confident to do so as maybe some actuaries are, right? I prefer to prophesy after the event has already occurred. And I think looking at 50 years into the future, or using an economic model to sketch a picture of 50 years into the future, can be a very dangerous thing to do. So all that to say, the pension's been designed this way to have a larger liability, and a much larger liability than what it has in asset. I think that can put us in a unfortunate, to use a light term, position. And so we should work hard to increase our security with this pension plan as soon as possible. The way to do so for us, for Alberta, is to form our own Alberta pension plan. Absolutely, without a doubt. Because then the share of asset per person will be so much larger with an Alberta pension plan than what it would be with the Canadian pension plan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I know the skepticism on side of outside of the screeching rhetoric of the NDP is, on one side we have people shouting, we're putting more into the CPP than we're actually getting out as a province.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then the rhetorical screeching retort is it's because we're a younger province. Well, when I looked at the median age of our province versus the rest of Canada, from BC to Ontario, it's a difference of 2 years. But yet at the same point, we put in a lot more than we're getting out. So what are those numbers that we're putting in per month from the province versus what we're taking out, Tanner? Do you know those numbers off the top of your head?
Yeah.
I just tried to look them up real quick, but I can't find my post.
Oh, that's fine. So yeah, you're right. We are younger. The reason we pay more is, no, we should be careful with our words here. The reason we disproportionately contribute to the CPP compared to other provinces is we're younger, correct? We're also wealthier. We make more money. And so we pay more because we make more to the CPP than other provinces, and we work more. We have more workers in this province per capita than other provinces.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the numbers? Well, the latest data shows that Alberta contributed about $9 or $9.1 billion to the CPP in 1 year. That's how much Alberta workers sent to the CPP. And Alberta seniors received back about 6 or 6.5. The numbers vary, of course, a little bit, depending from on year to year. But on average, we send about $2.5 or $3 billion more to the Canadian pension plan every year than what our seniors receive. And this isn't an emerging phenomenon. Again, this has been happening for decades, right? Alberta always, except for a very short string of years in the 90s when the numbers were about equal. Other than that, Alberta always sends more to the CPP than what our seniors receive, just as a consequence of our demographic advantage.
So we're 33% higher than what we're paying out 33% higher than what we're actually getting back into our communities. Roughly speaking.
Yeah, roughly speaking. Yes. That, and again, it varies a bit, but that's the average. It's about 2.5. You could probably average it out and say, yeah, about 2.5 or $2.75 billion more every year. And again, that's just, it's because we're younger, it's because we're wealthier, and it's because we work more than other provinces on average. So it gives us an opportunity then to form a pension plan which far better works for our benefit than what the CPP does.
Mhm.
Now there's another talking point that goes on, and it's it's all these people saying it's because the seniors from Alberta don't retire in Alberta. That's why we get less money back. They're moving to the Maritimes or they're moving to BC. Now, seniors from Alberta, I'm going to go with costs of real estate from Alberta to BC right now. If anybody tells me that they're selling their home in Alberta to retire in BC on a mass scale, I'm going to say they're full of shit, because you can't buy a condo in BC for what you can buy a relatively substantial home in Alberta. Are these people moving to Saskatchewan, Manitoba, to the Maritimes? Not most likely, Quebec or Ontario, because unless they're moving into northern Ontario or northern Quebec, they're not finding any value in property. They're not finding a good investment for retirement. So I'm having to think that while this may have been true once upon a time when rich Albertans were buying a property in BC or moving out to the Maritimes, I don't think that that's the same thing that we're looking at now. So how much, if we're taking in this substantial amount less, if we're taking a substantial amount less in from the CPP than we're actually paying into it, how much are we owed to Albertans that are migrating out of the provinces or migrating out of Alberta into other provinces?
Right. No, Nicole, you want to answer? Not, I can.
Yeah, no, go ahead, answer that one.
Sure. The difference here is negligible. Like, do people honestly believe that there are so many Albertans leaving the province when they retire that they are taking some $2.5 to $3 billion worth of capital, worth of pension, when the average new pension for new pensioners is $758 a month, which is what? Like, is that like $9,000 a year ish? Maybe a little bit less than that, somewhere in there. That's a lot of people to add up to $2.5 or $3 billion in difference. No, I find that to be a nonsensical argument. The demographic data shows, as a matter of fact, people are flooding Alberta right now.
Yes.
They are coming from other provinces into Alberta because it's more affordable to live here compared to the rest of the country. There are jobs here, or more jobs anyway, than there are in the rest of the country, and so on and so on. And so I think that argument is void. I think it's null. It doesn't compute. Doesn't make any sense. No. The reason the numbers are what they are in Alberta is because we're younger, wealthier, and we work more. Yep, this is just a consequence of the resource we've been blessed with the industry, the capacity for work that we have in this province, our ability to attract capital or investment compared to other provinces, and so on. Yep, that's the reason.
I think another part too is that we utilize our resources. Like, there's many provinces that have a lot of industries that they're not capitalizing on. You have the forestries, you have fisheries, you have oil and gas, and Alberta seems to be the one that's expanding on all of those resources, and the rest of Canada is coming here to work in Alberta so that they can leave the rest of Canada alone. But I mean, you look at Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, there's so many resources that they could use out there and they could build up their community. And yet the majority of Newfoundland and Labradorians and Nova Scotians, they're coming here to work because they get paid more. There's more hours, there's more work, and they're still coming in here. I'd say that would be a bigger issue, is people coming to Alberta to work more, but it would then drive our province up even higher.
So on the same note, we get people that, let's say it's from Newfoundland, Labrador, that come into Alberta and they work for a few years. They make above average income, which means they're paying above average CPP. They're contributing more in from the province. But then when they retire, they're retiring back in Newfoundland. So, that money is actually, what's being paid out inside of Newfoundland is actually being compensated by what was paid from Alberta. Is that a big part of the equation as well?
Yeah, it's part, but again, not a huge Massive part. The way the CPP Act is worded is you are considered a worker of whatever province your employer's establishment is located in. So if you come from Newfoundland to work in the oil sands, and the company you're working for has a physical establishment, a location in Alberta, and you're paid from that location, then you are considered an Alberta worker. Yes, that's correct. And it'd be the same would be true for an Alberta pension plan, obviously. Um, and so in that regard, yes, you're sending back more money to the CPP because presumably you're making more money here in Alberta. And then when you retire, you go back to Nova Scotia or Newfoundland, wherever you traveled from, let's say, and receive your Canadian pension plan check, what they believe you're owed. But because the calculation that determines how much you're owed is the same, whether you live in BC or New Brunswick or Ontario or Saskatchewan or Alberta, it doesn't change much. It doesn't change much. No. Yeah, it's a very small factor. There are far more Albertans who come from Alberta, stay in Alberta, work in Alberta, and retire in Alberta than there are individuals who come from out of province, work here for 30 years, and then move back to their home province when all is said and done. That isn't a common occurrence. Not in the grand scheme of things.
Now, when it was sat down and they calculated, what Alberta is owed by the CPP, and there's it seems like a very large number, and I can't remember, it was like 300 of the 620 or 215 of the 620. It was a very large figure, and it's somewhere between what that calculation is and the the lower side of what the Liberals think that we're owed to, that we may actually get if we decided to walk away from this. But as I understand it, given what we're overpaying into the pension CPP right now, if we took $0 and continued on the same rates that we're currently paying in Alberta right now, that we're paying to the CP, but into an APP plan, is we would have that same bank build up inside of an Alberta pension plan as we would have walked away from in the CPP. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, and see, theoretically that works. Because again, we disproportionately contribute 2.5 or 3 billion every year. We still have individuals working in this province, and so from those numbers alone, we could say and can say, yes, an Alberta pension plan would be an Alberta pension plan with no initial asset would have sufficient funds to pay for seniors' pension checks. However, let's suppose that tomorrow, for whatever reason, every Albertan stopped working. We're no more Alberta workers, and you had your own Alberta pension plan. Well, you'd still owe Alberta seniors their money, obviously, and it'd be intolerable to see them not have that money. And so if you had every Alberta worker stop working for a year and therefore not contribute to an Alberta pension plan, where would you find the money to pay Alberta seniors their Alberta pension plan checks? If you have no asset pile, you can't do so. This is why we need our portion of our asset pile that is owed to us, that we deserve, because that way, should some unfathomable, unthinkable disaster strike where every Albertan stops working, you can still, in that year or 2 years, pull from the pension plan's asset pile to pay out seniors what they're owed. So it's a kind of a funny answer to that question, because can you have an Alberta pension plan without an initial asset pile to start? Yes, you can, based on the idea that Alberta workers will continue to work every year. Yes. But the government will say, what if they're not working like they are right now every year? What if next year they're not working? We still have to pay our seniors. So in that case, you do want an asset pile and deserve it and need it to guarantee that structural stability and then watch it grow. That's a good question. Yeah, with a funny answer.
Yeah, no. So I mean, if we went into full-on green communism, where we shut down all the oil plants, which is what exactly they're trying to do, rob us of our provincial resources, that would collapse the economy inside of the province. That would have a periphery effect on just about everything that operates inside of the province, where there would be a number. I mean, it would take an absolute catastrophic event, an asteroid hitting Calgary or Edmonton, right? Like it would take something globally changing in order for that to happen. But I understand what you're saying. Is yes, we could walk away, but why should we?
Well,
And
yeah.
and why would we? Because under the same premise is if if these people feel like they're entitled to our money, why shouldn't we be entitled to our money?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I get that point a lot, which is it's so selfish, for you to leave. It's so selfish for you to take your money from the pension. And I think that's complete nonsense. Suppose there lived a very great king, very large king, let's say. And he travels around on his throne, eh? You know how they used to do that in ancient days, where the king would sit on a little pillow, and then he would have 4 servants hike him up on a pole, and they'd carry him like the Ark of the Covenant kind of thing. Suppose that you have such a king, and then suppose that he pays each servant $25 an hour to carry him around wherever he goes. Well, one day, the servant who operates the pole on the front left side of the carriage, the throne, finds out that he can get a job working somewhere else, earning $40 an hour instead of 25, so he can better provide for his family. And thus he tells the king, I'm leaving this position and I'm going to work over at company X over here, so I can earn $40 an hour instead of $25 an hour working for you. Now the king stands up and he says, you're selfish. You're selfish. How could you do this, you selfish pig? But you and I can ask ourselves, who's selfish? Is it the king who's being selfish or the servant? And the answer, of course, is the king. Now, all you have to do is put a name to the king, and we can very easily understand that the king's name is Ottawa, right? It's not selfish for us to want to increase our lot in life. That isn't selfishness. Not at all. It is selfish, however, for the Eastern elite to tell us that we have no right to increase our lot in life so that they can maintain their lot in life as it stands right now.
Yeah, and we talked about this at the James Lindsay event, and kind of went through this in where the idea of equality wasn't able to bring everybody up to the same equal line. So what they had to do is they had to crush those that were higher in achievement down to make everybody else feel equal. Well, we're not equal just because your idea of equalities, has changed, or because we've shifted the definition of what equality actually means. And I think a big portion of that is, the detriment that we're seeing on a society. And I don't want to blame millennials, because I can't blame millennials. We're the ones that put them into the world. We're the ones that fucked up on them, giving them the participation trophies for just showing up, right? So a big portion of that, I think, rides on the, us older dogs that put these people in the world, and, under the idea that we want them to have a better life. So because they have this attitude, which, seems to be a lot more steered to what they're entitled to, we're still responsible for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I honestly do believe that. But at the same time, we're still responsible to ourselves. When you take a generation of people that doesn't necessarily want to work, and that's what they keep telling us. The reason that we need more foreign workers is because Canadians don't want to do the job anymore. Well, we're going to get to a time when no Canadians want to work, and we can't afford more foreigners, and somebody's going to have to change my diapers. So, we're looking at a serious situation that's going to come into pass here, where we have to really start addressing serious conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely.
That kind of shut down the conversation. Eh?
No,
It is true.
Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
It's so hard because, like you said, like there's things that happen in life that we need people to work. Like I'm actually just recovering from a surgery. Never did I thought that I would actually go into the hospital for a surgery after COVID. It was the last place I ever wanted to go. But my God, am I grateful for the fact that we have healthcare workers that still care and are doing their job, because there's an emergency surgery where you have to go in, you have to do that when you get older and you can't go to the bathroom on your own and you need someone to help you change a diaper. It's not something that's a horrible fate for a person that's getting older. It's something that is a requirement, and it's our duty. It's my duty to take care of people that are older than me, and then the generation under me taking care of our generation, and that's what it's supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about, well, we don't want to work anymore. We have to work. We have to work. There's services that are provided. And if you talk faith, if you talk about God, if you talk about any of that, we are here to serve and protect and provide. That is absolutely one of the biggest things that we are meant to do. And I think that's one of the things with an Alberta pension plan that we can start doing for our seniors. We can actually start making a bigger difference for them, even if it's a small chunk for the first few years. That's like 10%, 20%, 40% is the number that we've been given that we could increase a senior's wage. That 40% to them would seem like $1 million. Hands down.
Well, it's the difference between making it and not, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a generation or there's an age group or a demographic that's alive right now that doesn't appreciate what 10% more in their paychecks would look like, because 10% less means that they stopped going for lunch when they worked, and the 10% less after that meant that they're brown bagging it, and the 10% less means that they're now eating peanut butter sandwiches, the same thing that that they had when they were going to school, because that's what's on the affordability scale. Now let's talk about something. Unless you wanted to hop in on the same topic, Tanner, go ahead, because I know you guys are kind of competing for space there.
No, you're.
But let's talk.
You're dead
Go
on the
ahead.
mark. No, I was just going to say I totally agree with Nicole. It's the state of the nation is becoming perilous, and so anything we can do to try and reverse that, we have an obligation to do.
Yeah.
And so on the Alberta side of things, there's another topic of conversation that we kind of throw back to, whereas if it's good enough for Quebec, it's good enough for Alberta, in reference to the fact that Quebec has their own pension plan that's not the CPP.
Mm-hmm.
But as I understand it, there's a larger contribution that Quebecers need to make for what they actually get out of the plan, but I don't know what those numbers look like. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, it's marginally higher, especially now with the CPP's new top-up, right? Their new tax. It is marginally higher, but there are reasons for that. One of the reasons being Quebec's pension plan does not have the mandate to maximize profit, their investing profit. That isn't the mandate of Quebec's pension. No, instead, Quebec has the mandate, the pension has the mandate of, in essence, sparking Quebec infrastructure. The Quebec pension plan is there to protect Quebec infrastructure and to help it flourish and grow. And so it means that the Quebec pension plan, with its investments, is willing to invest in a Quebec investment, knowing it might only earn a rate of return on investment of, 6%, compared to investing in a Montana investment, let's say, that would earn them 10% rates of return. Quebec knows that. The pension plan knows that. And they're fine with taking that hit because it means helping Quebec infrastructure and Quebec business expand. It protects that industry. So to make up the difference then, as a consequence of these foregone investment rates of return, the Quebec pension plan does indeed raise up its contribution rates, albeit marginally compared to the CPP. More than that, Quebec is much older than Alberta. They have more pensioners collecting pension than what Alberta does per capita, without a doubt. And finally, the Quebec pension plan's benefits for widows and widowers is far superior compared to what the Canadian pension plan offers. So it's really a give and take. We only, from the one side, we only ever hear that Quebec's pension plan rates, their contribution rates are higher than the CPP's, but we never hear about the reason that it's so, or the increased widow or widower's pension. and the increased or the advanced age of Quebec compared to, in this case, Alberta.
And on that, as I understand it, when you have a spouse that passes, you become a widow or a widower, you get a one-time payout on their pension, and it's like $2,500 or something along those lines. And
Yes.
you're saying that Quebec has a much more in-depth program. Now, I don't know what those numbers are. Do you have an idea of what those numbers are?
Yeah,
Okay.
see, we can even take the CPPs first. So you're right, you get a $2,500 benefit as a widow or widower, a one-time payout, but that is taxed. So it's actually more like $1,900 some dollars after tax. Then once that process is complete, and I'll be brief here, as brief as I can be, just because it's a long answer. Once that process is complete, you as a widow or widower are entitled to, and this is if you're older than 65, you are entitled to up to 60% of your deceased spouse's pension. So if your deceased spouse was earning $1,000 a month in pension, you are entitled to up to $600 of that pension. But you're not going to see it. You're not going to get that amount of pension from your deceased spouse's pension. Why? Because there are other restrictions that come into account when the CPP calculates your benefits. What I mean to say is, for example, as individuals, you are, or as an individual pensioner, you are allowed to earn from the CPP $1,365 a month, no more. If you pulled your pension at 65, you cannot earn more than $1,365 a month when you take your pension. That's it. That's the max. So if you're earning $1,000 a month in pension, and so is your spouse, and then your spouse passes away, it's not as though you're going to earn $1,600 total, right? Because you would be entitled to that $600, 60% of your spouse's pension, because that would eclipse the maximum allowable amount for individuals of $1,365. Now you'd say, okay, fine, as bad as that is, I guess I'll take the $1,365 and call it quits. Nope, you won't, because there are more restrictions that are added into the equation, into that CPP equation, which decreases your widow or widower's pension even further. So will you see $1,365? You won't. Would you even see $1,200? Even that seems a little bit high. No, the payout from your deceased spouse's pension is very small. Yeah, it's embarrassingly and insultingly low for that matter. Now, Quebec's is different insofar as, right, yes, put simply, they just get more money when they are receiving the widow or widower's pension. The cut is higher. So as much as the CPP reduces, Quebec's doesn't reduce that much. And you can't put an individual number on it because, of course, it's different for every individual and circumstance, but the benefits are superior compared to what the CPP offers. Yep, we're hearing that a lot. It's just about how much lower the widow or widower's pension is than what tragically widow or widowers expected.
A friend of mine, their mother passed away at 68, and their father went to collect their pension, and they were told, you get a whopping $15.65 extra a month. That's it from his spouse's pension. So something that they've contributed both for their whole lives. He gets his, she got hers, she passes, he gets $15. That's what, 2 cups of coffee at Starbucks right now?
Can't even buy a deck of smokes for that these days.
It's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. Like you're married and you become one, and everything is together as a family. Everything. You don't do anything usually without talking together. You might buy a cup of coffee or go out for a supper or something like that. But any big expenses are generally discussed with a family and a family unit, except when you go to pay taxes. You are still considered separate from your spouse. You pay into your taxes and you do up your own taxes because you're paying into whatever, and they do their own. Nothing is together when it comes to the government, because you guys together would actually probably make a lot more money and they'd have to pay more in, especially in a circumstance like a stay-at-home mom. Technically, I'm a dependent. My kids are a dependent, and my husband is contributing and covering all of the expenses. But if he passes, I would receive nothing.
You get zits.
I get a death benefit, not even a pension benefit or part of his widow's pension. It's just a death benefit to help pay for his expenses of a funeral.
Yeah, and those are taxed as well. Guys, we're approaching the 2 hour mark, and I don't like to go too much longer than 2 hours because I find the attention span of most people, including my own, caps at about 45 seconds. At about the 2 hour mark. So I want to thank both of you for taking some time and sitting through this. And I think we've gone through like everything. I'm not sure if anybody could have any questions, but again, what I want to say is that Tanner has agreed to come on a Zoom town hall, which means we're having open discussions, which means if, politely you want to call him a complete fucking liar, I'll allow that. If you want to get belligerent and rude or whatever, or, I know Tanner can defend his position, and I know he's got the figures and data to back it up. We're going to provide some information that everybody can read through. But it is an open discussion. That's the biggest thing, is it's an open discussion. And again, I want to bring up Nicole's efforts inside of this. Greatly appreciated, Nicole. I hope you join us on Friday. It starts at 7, but I understand, you've got kids to tend to as well. But hop in on the Zoom call if other people have conversations or, need to reach into those areas of expertise that you're into. It'd be great to have you on board with that conversation as well. But a big part of it is that I think a lot of us were sold on the idea of an Alberta pension plan, or some of us are sold on the idea of an Alberta pension plan just to be anti-federal. But there seems to be a lot more than sticking it to the libs. It seems to be more of a pro-Alberta type movement, or, it's more provincial than it is anything else. So, closing arguments, and again, I'm going to go by chivalry. Nicole, closing arguments as to why you think an Alberta pension plan is a great way to move for Albertans.
In closing, it's the only way forward, in my honest opinion. And I think I agree wholeheartedly. Tanner and I have had massive conversations about this. Our seniors deserve more. Our seniors deserve better. And I know that they think that this won't affect them. It won't apply to them because they're old. They've been there, done that. This actually is specifically for them. And we, as a generation, from the baby boomers going forward, we need to give them the dedication that they deserve for what they've done for our country. And Alberta, absolutely, we need this, because if we don't, we'll stuck under the Fed's thumb for the rest of our lives. Like, they'll look at us and go, Alberta had a chance and they walked away. And it's true. We have one chance. We need 270,000 signatures. You think it would be easy just to get that 270? If you know people, please have them sign up on the website, just to have their voices heard. This is not a yes or a no. It's simply to make your voice matter. And it's about time we stand up and have our voices matter.
And I'm just going to post the link in the open chat here. But again, I will go through a recap and make sure that everybody has access to the information that we've covered, as well as some information on both yourself, Nicole, and again on Tanner. Tanner, take it away, man. Final closing arguments from an economist point of view inside of the province.
Like Nicole said, it's the economic advantages here that are ready for our taking are incredible. And we have an obligation to do so, again, to benefit our seniors, benefit our workers, benefit even our children and our grandchildren, right? In this province, we're younger, we're wealthier, and we work more than others in the country. And so we have this demographic advantage, which can be used to see that seniors' checks are increased in size, or contribution rates are slashed for workers right now, saving them thousands of dollars every single year, especially when you account for opportunity cost, as in you could invest those thousands of dollars that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So is there an economic benefit to this plan? Oh, absolutely. I have yet to read a report or a paper or a research document that says Albertans would be harmed with an Alberta pension plan economically. I can't find one. At best, I read that the benefits aren't as large as some people are saying. Now, there's a disagreement or an argument about that, but no one is saying that you will be worse off with an Alberta pension plan than what you are with a Canadian pension plan right now. Nope, that argument doesn't exist because the numbers are too concrete. The mathematics works out, the economics works out. And so, because we have this opportunity before us, and because we have an obligation to do what's best for our seniors and ourselves and our children and our grandchildren, the Alberta pension plan is something we absolutely have to pursue.
Perfect. Great closing. So I want to take everybody that's taken some time to view the stream, that sat in with us. Thanks for caring about your province, or thanks for caring about the conversation, because it is an important conversation that we need to have. And again, I want to welcome everybody to the Zoom call. It'll be published on my Substack. I'll share the link with Nicole and Tanner. They can share it inside of their communities for people that don't quite make it out to the meetings, but still may have some questions or may have not caught on to some of the nuances that we've talked about this evening. And again, huge thanks to Nicole for help setting this up with Tanner, and Tanner for hopping in on the conversation. And I hope to see you guys again on Friday.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks a whole
Have a
bunch.
great evening, everybody.
You too.
Have a great night.